running your business in a way that protects your margin and your time is the power move, right? And this starts here on the wholesale side with having your pricing right and a reorder minimum and an opening order minimum that protects your time and your profitability. Like hard stop, right? Hey friend, quick question for you. Are you feeling stuck with how to get your brand to stand out on Faire? I'm asking you because as a buyer myself, I can tell you that there are just so many brands out there vying for the attention of these buyers, but I know that your brand has something so special and it needs to be seen. I put together a private podcast for you that goes deeper into what buyers are really looking for on the Faire platform and how you can stand out from the crowd to grow your wholesale business and really land those dream buyers. So if this resonates with you, head to the link in the show notes for instant access. Welcome back to the Buyer Side Chat. And I hope that you're ready for, I'm going to call it a little bit of a tough love conversation today, because we're going to dive into a topic that I continuously see on Faire. Continuously see this. And I also get asked about it a lot. And so I felt like it made for a really nice podcast episode, because if I'm getting asked about it and I'm also seeing it, then likely it's something that has been on your mind as well. And what we're going to talk about is your wholesale MOQs. Okay. We're going to talk about those minimum order quantities and how they could likely be costing you money and orders, which I guess is both of them, right? They could be costing you money. And we don't want that. We don't want to give any reason for a buyer to doubt your brand. We want them to convert without any type of question. Okay. We also want you to make as much money, as much profit as possible. So I hear this all the time. Every time I've had a conversation with somebody that I've done an audit for, I give the feedback. If their MOQ feels like it's too low, I say, hey, you need to raise this. And the thing that I always hear almost without fail is I really want to keep my MOQ low so that I can get more retailers to buy from me. Does that sound familiar to you? You want to get more buyers in the door. You might be a newer brand, newer to wholesale, new on Faire. And so you're like, I'm going to give them the option to come in at a lower MOQ so they can try my brand out. And I get it. And that seems like it might be a smart move. So the easier you make it for a retailer to place an order, the more orders you get, right? Except no, that's actually not how this plays out in, I'm going to call it the real world of wholesale. This isn't really how it works. It's kind of that buyer consumer mindset psyche that we're going to be talking about here. And I think that, Faire has really opened up the doors to make it really accessible for brands that are either starting out on wholesale to just kind of get their feet wet with it, right? But there is a foundational step that's missing, and that is really understanding how wholesale works, how MOQs work, and how they can really play into your profitability, and also getting those aligned ideal retailers to place orders from you. Because you may actually be turning your ideal retailer away by not having your MOQ set right. So we're going to talk in this chat about some of the biggest mistakes that I see with wholesale MOQs, particularly on Faire, but also off, what buyers actually want to see and what really kind of turns them off. And then how to really address that I want to keep it low mindset and how that might actually be hurting your business more than helping it. Because here's the deal. If you don't get this right, you're not only leaving money on the table, but you're actually, making it harder for buyers to take your brand seriously. There's been so many times throughout my journey of buying where I have been interested in a product and then I go check them out and I'm like, oh, they have a really low MOQ and this makes me think that maybe they aren't a legit or an established brand. They might not know the ins and the outs. It gives me a pause. Okay. So that's why this is a really important conversation that I want to just cover. And even if you already feel like you're good, you're solid with your MOQ, encourage you to listen to this because it might have you think a little bit differently. Perhaps you could raise your MOQ. Maybe your MOQ is a little too high in some instances, and we can talk about that as well. But there might be ways that you could find more profit, more opportunity in your business if you just think a little bit differently. And as I like to say, think like a buyer and reevaluate where your MOQs are. So whether you're brand new in wholesale or you're more established, let's keep listening. Let's talk about this and let's see if there's ways that we can improve your profitability and your process. Okay. So the first thing, and I already alluded to this, like the biggest mistake is that I see MOQs, your opening order minimum is too low. Okay. This MOQ, so if you're brand new to wholesale, that's minimum opening order quantity, minimum order quantity. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. If you're new to wholesale, MOQ is your opening order minimum, okay? This is the amount that a retailer has to spend when they place their very first order with you. Their very first order is that MOQ. There's also a reorder minimum, which we'll talk about, okay? What I see so often is that brands are setting this way too low. And I see this way more on Faire than I do with direct outreach. So on Faire in particular, and I think that that's because there's a lot of newer to wholesale brands or maybe just newer brands in general on the platform making this mistake. And when I say way too low, I mean, first of all, I have seen no minimum order quantity, which makes my skin crawl and makes me like want to email them and say, hey, you didn't ask for this advice, but you need a minimum. You need to add a minimum here. But also like $50, $75, I see a lot. And also $100, sometimes $150, but I think that we'll talk about that. But really anything at $100 or lower, I want you to really think about. And like I said, I know why you're doing it. You really think, okay, if I make it low, more buyers are going to take a chance on me. But here's really the truth about this. So a store that is hesitant to spend a few $100s, I mean, when I say that, $200 even, right? Or $150. If they're not willing to spend that, they're likely not your ideal wholesale buyer, right? They're likely not the ideal retailer for you. Okay. You want to really think about who you're trying to target, what retailers, what stores you want to be in when you're setting that MOQ, because that will set you up for success and that will help you to understand where to put that MOQ. Okay. Buyers expect to invest when they're bringing in a new brand. Like it's actually weird if your opening order minimum is too low. As a buyer, it's weird. I mean, it's like, oh, why is that so low? And like I was saying before, it's like, it made me think, okay, this brand might be brand new, which is totally fine. Totally fine to be brand new. That wouldn't stop me as a buyer from bringing a new brand into my store, but it would give me a little bit of pause if they were so low that it was almost devaluing themselves, right? So you want to think about how is that what's the perception, right, of my MOQ? If it's so low that a buyer might think that they don't trust to buy from me, you don't want that, right? Even if you are new, it's like you got to pretend, fake it till you make it kind of thing. This is an instance of like, come out the gate aligned with where you should be for your MOQ, and then you're removing that question or that doubt that a retailer may have. Okay. And I also want to talk just about when you're setting that MOQ so low, like if you're at $75, even $100 in some instances, and definitely if you're at $0, it's really not going to move the needle for you in your business, right? Like to sell your product at likely around 50% off of your MSRP that you're selling it to your direct customers, if you're selling it at a 50% margin and you're only requiring a buyer to spend $50 or $75, how is that scalable for you, right? How is that scalable? it's really not scalable. And especially, you might be by yourself right now, but especially when you bring a team in, you have to pay them hourly to fulfill those orders. And if you're only charging or not charging, what's the word here? If you're only requiring, there we go, $75 from a buyer to buy your product at half of the cost that you could be selling it to your own consumers, you can probably barely afford to have somebody come in and help you do that, right? So you really want to think about not only the perceived value for the buyers, but also what's scalable for you. Are you able to grow at this rate? And you might be thinking, well, okay, I'm not trying to think about that in this exact moment because right now I'm just trying to get some people to buy my flippin' product on Faire. But the fact that you're that low might be the reason that they're not buying from you. So that's just something to really think about there. And I want to note here too that your minimum is really dependent on your product category. So you do want to do some research to determine where your competitors are at. So that could be true competition. That could also be aspirational brands that you're like, I look to this brand because they're farther along than me. I'm not, they don't feel like they're necessarily a direct competitor. I aspire to be them someday. Where are they priced at? They might likely be priced or have their minimum set higher than you because they're more established, which is totally fine, but it's good to just understand that. And then look at your true competitors and just see where they're priced at. So different product categories have different minimums. There's like standard practices out there. It's something that we talk inside the Faire Bootcamp about to help you set your minimum if you're not quite sure if you are in the right spot there. So that is something that we do go into there to help you understand what category you're in and if you are priced right from that minimum and reorder set quantities, okay? So I would say generally, I recommend that you're at $150 to $350 for your MOQ. That opening order within that range usually feels pretty good. And this is specifically for like gift brands. If your product is giftable, so meaning like stationery, candles, small home goods, things like that. Okay. If you're a higher end, like premium brand, or you're in, and when I say that, I also can mean like jewelry where you have like true, gold and gemstones and higher price point products, or you're really in the scaling phase and your goal is to attract larger retailers. You're not trying to get into mid to small retailers. Then you want to be more in like the 500 and up range, like 500 to 1,000 is pretty common for the scaling gift brands, up to 1,000 for higher price point brands. Okay. Hopefully that gives you an idea of ranges that are pretty standard on the Faire platform and also with direct email outreach. Okay. So the thing that I like to talk about or think about here is when you're trying to set your minimum, you also want to think about like, okay, not only is it a little bit of like a red/yellow flag whenever a brand's minimum is so low, but you on your end want to make sure not only are you being profitable, but also that the buyers, the retailers that are buying your product are buying enough product to actually have a decent presence of your product in their store, right? It'll make more of an impact whenever they have $200 worth of your line in their store versus $50 worth of your line. It's this little tiny presentation of your product. One person comes in and buys it, and then all of a sudden there's no presence. And then, it doesn't look like it's selling because it's like tucked in the corner. They just kind of hide it to make room for the products or the brands where they have brought in more products from them, right? So you want to really think about not only the brand perception or the buyer perception of your brand, but also your brand's presence in their store. Because you don't want to be fulfilling these like teeny tiny wholesale orders that don't make sense financially and also don't make an impact for your retailers. Okay. The second big thing is that reorder minimum is also too low. The reorder minimum is also too low. Or actually, let me say this too. Either the reorder minimum is too low because you are only starting out at $50 or $75, so your reorder minimum is zero, or that reorder minimum is higher than the MOQ. That's a big no-no. So I would say that's even a bigger no-no than a $0 reorder minimum, although both of them, we don't want to do that. So let's talk about the really low MOQ for your reorders. And that's a pretty easy one to explain, right? If you're starting out low, you got nowhere to go to ask them for that reorder. So you don't want buyers coming back saying, oh, I can just come in and I can just buy one SKU to just fill in this, someone bought 2 products, or 2 units, and I just want to replace that because I bought such a tiny amount to begin with, so I'm buying 2 more. That is such a waste of your time. You don't want to do that. So when you're starting out too low, you got nowhere to go. Okay. When your reorder minimum is too high, meaning higher than your MOQ, that is a big oops, we don't want to do that. And a lot of that, or I would say 90% of the time that I've come into this issue and I've had a conversation with the brand about it, meaning it's been inside the Faire bootcamp, through an audit, something like that, the feedback is, well, I wanted them to be able to try out my brand. So I set my minimum order low to get them in the door. And then when they love it and they realize that it sells, because I know it's going to, I want to make more money on the reorder. So I kind of balance out. But actually, that's not how that works. What you want to do is be higher up front so that you get those ideal retailers in. They're buying a nice assortment of your product to make a presence in their store. Okay. They sell it. Maybe they sell 2 products really, really well. And they're like, shoot, I blew through those. I want to get a reorder in that product. They want to be able to come back and buy a smaller reorder of the things that sold to get it back in and fill that hole. You don't want them to have to wait for everything to sell down before they can afford to come back and buy from you. So that is why it's standard best practice to have your reorder minimum 50% of your opening order minimum. That is the case across all categories. That's not category specific, meaning that's not candle industry or giftable industry, I should say, versus apparel versus accessories. It's not category specific across the board. It's also not Faire specific. That is wholesale industry standard. Okay, so let's say your opening order minimum is $250. Your reorder minimum should be $125. That's just standard best practice. Okay. The last thing really that I'd like to touch on here is when the product minimums don't align to that MOQ. So let's say you have a let's say a $200 opening order minimum, but then all your products have 0 units MOQ. Meaning they don't have to have a set case pack. They don't have to have a set number of individual units per SKU that they have to buy. And then what happens is, okay, so yeah, that's great that you have this really nice, $200 opening minimum, but then the buyers can come in and they can buy one of this thing, one of that thing. And before you know it, you or the person on your team or the team is pick packing one of all this. And then you're trying to figure out how to fit it into a box to ship it to them. And it's not consistent. You really want to be consistent and you want to have industry standards for your product case packs or your minimums per SKU. It's another thing that we talk about in the Faire Bootcamp to make sure that you're really set up for that. Not only does that help the retailer, truly, they don't have to do the math. They don't have to figure it out. It's just, oh, okay, these come in case packs of 3 and I'm going to get 4 of them. So I need 12, right? I'm going to get a dozen versus oh, I guess I could buy 8 or maybe 9. No, we're just going to set that case pack and make it easier for the retailer to figure it out. And also, you're not going to be surprised when I say this, it also makes it easier for you as you're scaling to be able to buy the right number of inventory because you can estimate how many orders you might sell and you sell them in, let's say, cases of 3, right? If you are a candle company, you can leverage your candle boxes that your supplier ships to you. So then suddenly, whenever you're shipping these orders, you've got the boxes already there, ready to go. You don't have to find new packaging, right? It's already like set up for success with the packaging for shipping it. It also just makes it easier when your team is packing their orders, right? They can print out that Faire invoice. They can take a look at it, or that Faire order form. They can take a look at it. They could easily pack it based on the number of case packs that were ordered. So it streamlines your operations. It streamlines the buying process, the shipping process, and it also helps your retailers. And not to mention, it helps to increase your average order value. Those MOQs are easily met because they have to buy, let's say, 5 products with just, baseline minimum case packs. And then suddenly they've hit that minimum order quantity. They have a nice breadth of your assortment, and they have a decent amount of depth behind those products to hit that. Likely when you do this, they're going to end up buying a little more than your MOQ because they're going to be forced to just go a little bit over it. So it's like a nice little tricky way to make sure that you are making as much profit, as much revenue as you can out of every order. So if some of these things are resonating with you and you're like, okay, I have some questions about my MOQ or my reorder, or maybe you're good with that, but you are all over the place with your case packs at the actual product level, this is a really good time to just drop your name on the wait list for the Faire Bootcamp VIP group, which is opening up at the end of April, just a couple weeks from now. I'm so excited. It's an 8-week live round. I have never done 8 weeks before. It's going to be so much fun to have those extra couple of weeks with those of you that are going through the live round. We're going to have a ton of calls, a ton of hands-on support and feedback, and time to just be in that community to make changes, get your Faire page either up and running or really optimizing it. There's a ton of top shops that have gone through this program and seen a lot of success. So I'd encourage you to drop your name on the waitlist in the show notes below. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about all right, what are buyers actually looking for? We've talked about some of these red flags. We've talked about, some of the things that have caused buyers to maybe take pause, but here's what I want to talk about. Here's the reality. Okay. If a retailer wants to carry your brand, they will place an order at your proper MOQ, period. Hard stop, right? If they are obsessed with your product, it's not going to matter if you're at 150 or 250. They're going to be like, I need this product in my store. Okay. Period. So when you set your minimums too low, I want to just reiterate this. Okay. You send a couple of very different messages to potential buyers. Okay. One, this is a red flag, but this tells potentially retailers that the brand doesn't believe in their value. And I know not one single person listening to this episode doesn't believe in the value of their brand, of their product. Not one single person thinks, I'm making these products, I'm designing these products, and they're crap. I'm trying to sell it anyway. No one thinks that, right? You are obsessed with your brand. You're obsessed with your product. You know it's going to sell really well for those retailers that are super aligned for your product. Okay? You believe in your value. So by having a low MOQ, it's actually showing that maybe you don't believe in your value. Okay? You don't really feel super confident. You're dipping your toe, which leads me to this brand isn't confident in their product and in their sell-through potential, right? You're not really confident that it's going to necessarily sell for the retailer. So you're just going to have a low minimum order value so they can just test it out. And if it doesn't sell, it's not a big deal because they didn't spend a lot of money. That is a subconscious thought. The retailer, the buyer might not be thinking that, very literally, but it's a subconscious thought that we have. Okay. The third thing really is that the brand might think, or the retailer might think that the brand doesn't really understand how wholesale works. And that is definitely one that is a conscious thought that you're new, right? And you're new and you don't really understand how wholesale works, which is okay sometimes when you're not looking for a big investment, but they might really love your product and they might be ready to buy it for their multiple locations or a really successful location or a really killer e-commerce shop. But if they see that you're undervaluing yourself. They might be like, oh, I don't know if they're going to know how to package this properly, how to ship it quickly. I just don't fully trust that they are like going to have the inventory I need consistently, right? Those are some things that kind of come through their mind. And honestly, buyers want to work with brands that have their shit together, right? We want to know when we're placing an order with you that you know what you're doing enough to be able to have us spend our money on your product, okay? And your MOQ is really like the first indicator of that because it's just bold, boom, in your face, especially, when you sign up or you're on Faire, you go to a brand's page and the MOQ is literally right in your face. So it's like the first thing that kind of triggers that doubt if it's not aligned, okay? So having a really strong MOQ that's in alignment competitively with the landscape of your direct competitors, it doesn't really scare buyers away. It actually makes you more attractive to them because they know that you understand what you're doing. You understand the industry and you know that your product sells, right? You feel confident in the value of your product. You feel confident that it's going to sell for them and you understand how the industry works. Even if you're like not 100% sure how it works, you're learning, you at least know this really foundational thing. Okay. So let's just kind of like recap and wrap this up. So a clear opening order minimum, which is again like 150 at the bare minimum, 250 to 350 for like most brands in the gift space, maybe even 100 to 350. Or if you're at a higher end retail, like apparel, jewelry, or you're in scaling mode, you'd be at like 500 or higher. That's what buyers are really expecting to see when they're buying from you wholesale, either direct or on Faire. We're not just talking Faire here. Okay. They're looking for a reorder minimum that makes sense comparative to your opening minimum, which would be like 50% of that, okay? Case packs and product minimums that make sense. You're not asking them to have this really great normal minimum, but like zero case pack. They can buy whatever the heck they want as long as they hit that minimum. We don't want that. Not requiring any minimum at the product level is also a red flag. And buyers are looking for a brand that just understands wholesale. They're way more likely to trust you and invest in you as a brand when you're structured properly. And if you are still nervous about raising your minimum, if you're still like, I hear you, Kristen, but I'm not totally sure. Okay, let's just talk about this. Higher MOQs does not mean fewer buyers. It means better for you buyers, more established buyers, right? It's okay for you to have buyers coming in that are just opening their shop and they're not really sure, but you don't want your entire wholesale business with a foundation of brand new retailers that have no idea what they're doing and maybe will never reorder from you because they don't have enough traffic coming into their stores. Like I said, it's okay to have a mix of that, but also you really want the established buyers that are going to come in, place a really great opening order, and then come back in for a reorder. That's the dream. Get them to order and order and order. Buyers are not looking for cheap. They're looking for proven, profitable product and brands, okay? Your opening order needs to be high enough to make sense for your business. Okay, that's a competitive landscape thing. If you are a candle company and you're only charging $50 for your opening order on Faire, you're way undervaluing your brand and it looks like a red flag. Okay, you need to be in line competitively. And the third thing that I want you to just sink into your brain here, running your business in a way that protects your margin and your time is the power move, right? And this starts here on the wholesale side with having your pricing right and a reorder minimum and an opening order minimum that protects your time and your profitability. Like hard stop, right? You need to be putting yourself first and making sure that you're setting your business up for scale. You're not giving it all away to the retailers, plus, the Faire commission, all the things that come in with that. Like you want to make sure you can afford to be on Faire, that you can afford to scale your business. And if you can't, then you're not ready for Faire yet, right? You're not ready for wholesale yet if you're not at the point where you can do that. And that's just like the hard truth. I said it was going to be a little bit of like a tough love combo, right? So the best thing that you can do, honestly, is just set your MOQs with confidence. After you've done some research, set it with confidence and just own it. Just own it. Have that full empowerment of this is my MOQ. And if it means I maybe get less orders in the beginning, you're ultimately going to make more money and more profit and bring in more aligned retailers in the long run. And I'm constantly talking about bringing in aligned retailers. That's a game changer for you with your wholesale business. The right buyers are going to come in and not even blink an eye with your MOQ. So if you've been playing small with those MOQs, let's just have this be your permission slip today to just level that up, right? Just let this be the permission slip that you need to say, I'm going to reevaluate this. And even if you just add $25 or $50 to your minimum today, it will pay off for you in the long run. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to just step in and own that for your business. Okay. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. And as always, if you feel like this hit home for you, I'd love for you to share this with a friend, a business friend, share it to your Instagram stories. It means so freaking much when I hear from you or I see you guys sharing it. So thank you so much. You can find me on Instagram at Kristen Fisher Coaching, and I'll see you inside the next chat. If you're ready to take your wholesale business to the next level on Faire, I invite you to check out the Faire Bootcamp. It's the only program of its kind that combines a step-by-step growth approach to optimize and stand out on Faire and buyer relationship building strategies to capture the attention of your ideal retailers, both on and off the Faire platform. With bite-sized, action-focused trainings, the Faire Bootcamp is designed to deliver results as quickly and efficiently as possible because I know you are busy and you do not have time to waste. So to learn more, head over to kristenfishercoaching.com/Faire Bootcamp. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. If you are loving the show, I would be so beyond grateful if you would rate and review the podcast and share it with one of your biz besties to help spread the word. I hope that you absolutely crush your sales this week. I'll be back to chat with you next Monday.